Hello, everyone, and welcome.
Hello.
Hi, welcome to this conversation with my friend, someone I have known for over 2 decades. And we have been on a journey together, Jesse Leon and I, as we have navigated the world of philanthropy and big foundations and great wealth and the enormous influence that institutions in philanthropy have. But we've navigated it coming from backgrounds that are somewhat atypical. Although I certainly believe my background, there were times of great challenge. What is contained in this book, your journey, the harrowing vignettes of pain and trauma that you suffered. I love the way you end with walking across the stage at Harvard and what it felt like to have your family there. And at that same time, though, pained and still hurting from all of the injustice and unfairness and the burdens of that. And yet, you are a joyful person. You are such a generous person, given that too many were not generous to you. But you also acknowledge that it was because there were people in your life, that individuals, and this is what is really important. We have to remind ourselves, because sometimes some of us, at least some of us in buildings like this, get caught up talking about systems and systems design and structural reforms. And what your story reminds us is that one person can change another person's life trajectory. And so let's start not at Harvard Square, but let's start with your family. A most, in some ways, typical poor Mexican immigrant family.
Yeah.
Talk about your family, Jesse Leon. And don't be nervous. This is the thing about Jesse. He always does this. Whatever I say, Jesse, I want you to come to do this, he'll say, I'm just too nervous. I'm just too nervous. This man is so brilliant. He is so smart, so charming, so funny and witty. And yet sometimes you still feel, like we all feel, that imposter syndrome. As you talk about going to Harvard, what were you doing at Harvard?
Right.
You poor kid who went to community college. What are you doing here at the Ford Foundation, Jesse Leon, on this stage with this book?
Changing people's lives
That's what you're about?
with people like you that believed in me. Because before I get into the story of my family, when I met you, you had just started, you left Abyssinian and you joined the Rockefeller Foundation, and I had just joined the Funders Network for Smart Growth. And my job was to bridge the movement between white environmentalist funders and regional equitable development funders focused on social justice and bringing these two movements together. And you were one of the first people that I reached out to create the Social Equity Caucus.
Yeah.
And I think you saw this scared, young Chicano kid entering the space of philanthropy with this big mission, and you believed in me.
Oh.
And you were one of those people that came into my life in those exact moments that I call moments of magic, because I didn't do this alone. And you believed in me, and I've been able to, 20 years later, continue to do the work that I do to try to change the lives of others. And what feeds that in my spirit is my family. In my book, I go back 3 generations on both sides of the family and talk about the resilience, the struggles that the women in my family had to endure to keep their families alive, and my mom doing the same thing for us. And I talk a lot about my ama in the book and how she just never gave up on me, in spite of how cruel and how painfully I treated her in my addiction. Because, you know, you see me, you see this happy, joyful, loving person that a lot of you know me as, that I try to be happy, I try to bring joy to others, but there was a point in my life where I was in the grips of addiction, and I was running the streets, and I was extremely violent, and I was extremely verbally abusive. And my mom never
And you
gave up.
write about this.
And I write
in
about
the
that.
book. I mean, in some way, I don't recognize you. I don't recognize you in some of the pages when you're hanging out with gangbangers and some of the things you're saying to your mother and your teachers and the people who are trying to help you. I don't recognize him. And yet, you demonstrate over the pages of the book why you were that person on page 28.
Yeah.
And so talk about that. I mean, talk about the evolution, right? Because but you always, you never stopped within you being that happy little boy, but some horrible things happened to that happy little boy.
Right. So it's funny, somebody sent me a text from Miami and said, I just finished the book, and I can't wait for you to throw on a Wonder Woman cape and just spin around on top of the table, twirling around like Wonder Woman. Because I used to love doing that after watching an episode of Wonder Woman. And especially because Linda Carter being Mexican.
Yes.
And so I went from being this loving, nerdy, caring kid, and then the sex abuse changed me. I blamed myself for being loving, caring, soft, for liking Wonder Woman. I blamed myself for bringing that on to me, for not being manly enough. And so I rejected everything about me. I rejected the kindness that my mom would bring out in me. And so, yet there were moments, I remember, not in the book, through the editing process, there were moments that my mom would be watching soap operas, as most Mexican moms do, telenovelas, and these are some of the happy moments where I would lay on the couch, put my head on my mom's lap, and she would just, rub my head, and I would just sit there, and longing for those moments of peace, where I can allow Jesse to be Jesse. But going down the deep, dark despair spiral of drug addiction and sexual violence, when you're going through it, I wanted to shun everything that was good, but too afraid to kill myself. And I talk about that.
Yeah, you do so poignantly. And for many people, whether they're parents or individuals who worry about and who experience addiction, let's just say drug addiction, which happened to you, it is often a response to pain.
Right.
And in your case, clearly, you were a victim at a very young age of the most horrific sexual violence
Right.
by multiple numbers of men.
Yep.
And I can't imagine, I was a queer little boy, but, I was just a normal queer little boy. I wasn't like having other men tell other men to come to this place where they could have sex with the little boy. And that happening on a weekly basis
Over and over.
for years. I mean, I just couldn't imagine a child experiencing that. And so it is completely imaginable to me why that child a few years later would be doing crystal meth.
And rejecting anything that resembled that queer little nerdy boy in a community of color where we don't see other queer nerdy boy characters out being successful in the world. You know, what you represent to me in watching your journey is, wow, I wonder what my life would have been like had the sexual abuse never happened. Would I have been like a mini Darren Walker? You know,
Much better.
just coming into his own and finding himself. Because I rejected. It's just, in Latino culture, we have machismo. And I talk a lot about machismo in the book. And how, in a lot of ways, we criticize machismo. And I felt the extreme negative impacts of it. But at the same time, that machismo culture is what kept me alive. I rejected anything soft, anything gay, anything that could be perceived of what I was going through at that time, because I didn't want my friends to know. If anyone knew, I was afraid my perpetrator would kill my parents. And so it was that hyper masculinity culture of the streets, that image that helped me survive. And sadly turned me to a really dark place where I almost went to jail.
Yeah. The violence, I mean,
violence
the fact
was
that
real.
you were like beating up people.
Yeah.
And really badly. I mean, you were in some really violent, engaged in some really violent acts.
To protect somebody else, right? And that was the interesting part about it, is I have taken on the role of protector. Even in the work that I do, I take on the role of protector. And I'm extremely codependent. I'm always making sure everyone else is okay before I do. And even in my world of philanthropy, it's always trying to help out others. Sometimes to my own detriment.
Yes, we've talked about that.
You know,
yes.
sometimes to my own
Exactly.
detriment. Learning when to pick and choose your battles.
Yes.
Learning when to allow someone else in a boardroom, to not come in to try to defend somebody, but allow them to have their journey and their process. But what people don't understand is, you know, we talk about belonging, we talk about diversity in the workplace. When you come from a history, like many of us do, because this isn't a unique story. My book is universal. There's many of us that have gone through sexual abuse, sexual violence, and sexual trauma. But when you walk into a boardroom at a foundation in the financing sector, and it's all white men in business suits, and 99% of my perpetrators were predominantly white men, often in business suits. Even now at my age, there's a moment when I'm walking in that I have to, and it's a millisecond of being able to say, okay, you're not reliving this. It's not happening again. You're safe. And unless I talk about it, people don't know that. What they see is a big, confident brown man that is, you know, what people see when they see me. But they don't know that it takes effort for me at the boardroom to bring my voice down, keep my hands in front of me, not move my hands around a lot or my head around a lot when I'm speaking. Because when I do, I start being perceived as that angry brown man that's hyper emotional, and it's constantly a code switching.
Well, and I think that
Juggling
you,
act.
as we've talked about over the years, I mean, the code switching is a critical skill that we all have to develop. But I do, I find it, you know, as we've discussed, the notion that because you lived in a highly racialized, classist community, country, but obviously you in Southern California, but the fact that most of the sort of, you were trafficked basically to white men who, from what you said, were not gay.
Right.
I mean, they weren't stereotypical gay men.
Right.
I mean, and so, one of the things I think, we worry about often is when this narrative is out there that we adult gay men are simply recruiting young boys. And it's interesting that often the stories you hear of sexual abuse during childhood, as you've discussed and as you do so beautifully in the book, these were often very middle-class looking white men in suits who loved to sexually abuse young brown and black boys. And you talk about that kind of trafficking of young brown and black boys. But how that experience, which was clearly racialized and understandably from your perspective, living in a segregated community, to have, these white men coming to, it's really understandable how even as an adult, how you experience a white man in a business suit.
Well, it's funny because I've never dated a white man. I have not, and I'm openly gay. I've never dated a white man or a white man in a business suit. And I often wonder, why is that? So I'm still in my healing journey.
Yep.
Today we were walking around Times Square and some guy had the really thick mustache that resembles Freddie Mercury, that 80s gay look of San Francisco. And for a minute, I still go through that, and it's a healing journey. It's a healing journey, but sadly, I'm learning post-book, now that the book is out there. I've had advocates in the space of sexual violence, childhood sexual violence, that I'm still learning about the terminology that I used. I became a sex worker at 14. So my perpetrators were drugging me. I became a dope fiend. When the authorities got involved and they disappeared, I had to find a way to support my drug habit. So casually, when you read the book, I meet some other child sex workers and learn that I satisfied the sexual fantasy of white men of being that Latino, hyper-masculine urban thug. And so at 14, so I was an exploited child. Regardless of the situation, regardless of the economics, regardless of all that, I was a child. And what I'm learning now, I'm going to my first men's healing retreat for the first time ever next week. I've been in recovery 29 years, clean and sober. I've done retreats, buku retreats, but I've never done one for just men healing from sexual trauma. And I found a group. Oprah had a special on her show. Tyler Perry was on there talking openly about his experiences. And I found this group that called Men Healing. And I'm going to go for the first time to this weekend retreat. And then I got connected with the group called the Brave Movement, which I believe Paul is here. And it's an organization started by survivors that just got the G7 to commit to address childhood sexual violence.
Yeah.
And being able to come in this next phase of my life, because it's out there, right? I can continue down the path of social impact investing in philanthropy, but it's out there. So I'm being open to my higher power moving me in the direction of where can I have greater impact in my totality. And so part of that is to ensure that no 14, 13, 12-year-old black, brown child have to feel that they are going to be the sexual fantasy of X, Y, or Z. That they can just be children. And one thing about me that's really sad that I'm able to honor is that now at my age, I'm able to explore what being a child was. Maybe I'll be able to throw on my cape and stand on the table and twirl around like Wonder Woman, because why not? I should be able to.
We agree.
You know?
We agree. We agree. So I want to talk about the kind of the educational journey, because the thing that I always, over the years when we've talked, have been so impressed was how you, even coming off of, a period well into high school, you went to high school in San Diego, you had a big graduating class, you figured it out, you got into community college. In your community, that was a big deal. That was a big deal. I mean,
Totally big deal.
but then you figured out a way to transfer to Berkeley.
Right.
So like nobody just like transfers from a junior college to Berkeley. I mean, this is the thing I've always said about you, about your resilience and your inner strength and your scrappiness and your ability to like put it together and get it together.
Thank you. And I'm learning to say, like, well, yeah, look at me now. But no, I got it. It's when you don't know what questions to ask. There's a section in my book where my community college counselor asks me, if there's anywhere in the world you could travel to, where would it be? And I said, Omaha. She said, well, why Omaha? And I said, once you get clean and, you start coming to yourself, we get chatty. I wasn't chatty. I was that real serious, holding up the wall, mad dogging, mean mugging everybody, would not engage in conversation with people. I was not that extrovert. But I told her, well, to be able to go visit all the animals that I would see on Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And she didn't laugh, right? She chuckled, and she said, well, one day at a time we'll get you there, and I want you to start thinking about college. And so when you don't know about education abroad, because we're not raised in the neighborhoods, that's even an opportunity. So having people in my life say, when you get to Berkeley, I want you to go to the Education Abroad program and ask to see if financial aid will cover you to study abroad at one point in your academic journey. So someone like a Darren Walker planted that seed. And once I got there, also in my book, my first night unpacking, a woman from the Academic Achievement Division, I won't disclose her name, she came to visit me and said, hey, I'm here to offer help for transfer students. Come by on Monday and we'll go through your academic plan and I'll walk you through some work-study programs to help you while you're here. We're your resource. If you don't know what's available, and then the Ford Foundation, the only reason I was able to go to the Kennedy School of Government was because the Ford Foundation was a funder of PPIA, the Public Policy International Affairs Fellowship, which used to be the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship, which was a Sloan Fellowship. And I did the Summer Institute, and the Ford Foundation provided the funding. $30,000, 15 from the institution, 15 from Ford, for fellows to be able to get a master's degree. People told me about PPIA. Other fellows said, no, you need to apply. So I credit those Darren Walkers of my life that knew exactly what Jesse needed when, and said, hey, why don't you check this out? And they believed enough in me that even when I wasn't willing to, they held my hand and walked me to the financial aid office to say, he needs a fee waiver for his GRE prep course, because I didn't know that was available. And so sometimes what I have to do with my sponsees and people that I mentor is hold their hand and say, come on, I'll walk with you. I'll ask the questions with you. Is he in good hands? Is she in good hands? Cool. Call me later? All right, cool. So there's that handoff and that follow through that I think we forget about sometimes in our work.
I think it's the sort of paying forward part that you really exemplify and know the importance and of the ecosystem that has to be built, because often, and this was one of the lessons that we've all learned, and certainly here at the Ford Foundation in early work, bringing people like you and me into elite higher education, just simply saying, oh, we're going to give a scholarship to this low-income person, and you turn up, good luck with succeeding, without understanding what it takes, the retention challenges. As you say, having the support mechanisms that middle-class students automatically have. I mean, as you and I've discussed, my mother, when I graduated, the dean called to say that I was receiving this award, and she had no idea what that was. I mean, she had no idea. I mean, I'm sure had she been educated, and I mean, she would have known this is a big deal. You talk about when you received your big fat packet from Harvard, from the Kennedy School, after being told that you weren't going to get in by one of the counselors. You call your mother and you tell her that this school that she's never heard of is in a place called Cambridge, Massachusetts. And she says, that sounds very far. Why aren't you going to UC Riverside?
San Diego State. Yeah.
Or San Diego State. That's where you should be. Why would you want to go? Because she didn't know. And it is often the case, and particularly in the immigrant and Latino communities, where families don't want their children to leave to go far away from family to be educated.
Right.
But ultimately, your ama, she really was proud of you, is proud of you, and has been by your side and has been the true, constant, unwavering partner on your journey.
Partner on my journey.
So talk about some of those magical moments, some more of those magical moments that you articulate here. And then I want to get to the last part where we're going to talk about big foundations, which are big problematic places to speak. So I want to go to that because I know we have some questions and I want to talk about big foundations, because when I first met you, you were working, as you say, with this group of a consortium of foundations, and so there could be nothing worse, in my view, in terms of another form of torture than to have to work for an organization that itself reports to a bunch of foundations. And so it was in that context that we met, and we were both one of the few brown people and certainly queer people in the room, and immediately just hit it off. But you now you've been working with the Walton Foundation on housing, which you did in the private sector because you had this career then in banking, and there you are at Bank of America and all these big banks working on housing and community development issues. And now you're in the context of helping these foundations to do housing, to do affordable housing, workforce housing. What does it feel like? I know Northwest Arkansas is not the most diverse place, and yet there is huge opportunity there. So talk about your work today and what you do working with the Walton Family Foundation.
So I'm a consultant. I have my own consulting firm. I'm also consulting the Humboldt Area Foundation in Northern California to create an impact investment fund around workforce housing at 50% to 100% area median income, which is affordable income ranges designated by federal and state governments. And so I've been blessed that I was asked to help create first grant-making portfolios around housing, given my background as a private real estate developer, my background in philanthropy as a funder, and my background in finance. So that morphed into, hey, if we put X amount of resources to create an impact investment fund for housing, what would that look like? Has it been done before? Non-low income housing tax credit, non-public subsidized, just straight impact investing to address the issues of affordable housing construction. And really hasn't really been done.
Well, because it's hard to do.
It's hard to do.
I mean, it's hard to build low-income housing
without public
without
subsidy.
tax credits or some
Exactly.
other form of subsidy.
And so we're figuring it out now, utilizing philanthropic resources. So much so that Facebook is exploring this other strategy and other foundations. So it feels good on my end to say, wow, I continue to create new programs and new strategies to hopefully improve people's lives because the low-income housing tax credit program is so competitive. And there's not enough resources in a lot of our communities. So really just trying to get as many resources as we can to leverage others to create the impact so that people can live in quality homes. What drives this passion for me, and let me just say this, is my mom has been in her same apartment for 41 years. Right before COVID, I moved home. I moved in with my mom, and I was in that same bedroom that I was when I was 8 years old, pre-sex abuse, during sex abuse, during drug addiction, getting clean. So here I am as an adult, post-Harvard, post-Berkeley, also UPenn, post-UPenn, living with my mom in that same apartment, and then COVID hits. So I'm forced to face a lot of my demons all over again and my past traumas that I thought I had already worked through. No job, trying to figure out where my life is going, when I get a call from the Walton Family Foundation asking me if I would be a consultant on this project. Wrapping up my book, trying to find an agent somewhere, and I had to come back to that same bedroom. But my mom has been able to live there because the landlords were Italian immigrants. When they died, they told their children, please do not raise her rent dramatically because she has nowhere else to go. And so my mom pays real affordable rent because of socially conscious landlords that know they can charge $4,000 a month for that 2-bedroom in San Diego. So I feel that it's my obligation, my duty to pay that forward and create that for other families elsewhere. I would love to be that kind. I would love to be able to one day own a fourplex and know that I can charge a shitload of money in rent. But you know what? I'm choosing not to because I want to help such family be able to stay there for the long term. It's possible.
It's absolutely possible.
It's possible. And so, I forgot where I was going with that.
That's okay, because we're going to continue. I want to give people time for questions because I can tell there's some people who have questions. And so we're going to start here in the middle, and then we'll work. Yes, sir, please. And remember, brief question.
No, definitely. My name is Eric Shaw.
Hi, Eric
I
Shaw.
happen to have met.
Yes, sorry, we want to hear you, Eric, so get to the microphone.
I'm excited that I met Jesse probably his first week of Harvard. So it's been a journey with us together. He got me a job in Miami. And I read the book, and first of all, I knew you were in recovery when we first met, but I didn't know the rest of the story, and wish I would have been more to support you, and I love you deeply. But it's been about 21 years since you graduated from Harvard. I know this because I graduated too at that time. What would be the title of your second book on that second 21 years of the journey?
Good question,
I
Eric.
know, great question. So my title of the book was not initially I'm Not Broken. My title was Nerd, N-E-R-D.
Right.
And Nerd, I decided to reclaim it and make it into an acronym to be Never Ending Resilience and Determination. So that was going to be the title of my book. And it became a little bit of a push-pull with the publisher because they felt that Nerd has since brings up an image of the white, techie nerd that has since been, somewhat vindicated by Silicon Valley. And my argument was, no, it's still not okay to be a nerdy person of color. We don't have many. We have Manny in Modern Family and Urkel. And so, I wanted to reclaim that. Right. And so if I were to write, or when I write a second book, why don't I say that?
Yes.
I think it would be life beyond Harvard and what came afterwards, because people think you go to Harvard, your life is laid out in front of you. But you know, as well as you, that my professional trajectory has been a lot of struggle to get the resources to the communities that I care about. Oftentimes with boards, foundation boards, and leaders that don't look like us. And so, I don't know, maybe I'm still not broken. Still here, look at me now. I really like Nerd because my brother still calls me Nerd. My best friend calls me Nerd. And reclaiming that as never-ending resilience, determination, I think is key for a lot of other young people of color to be able to say, I can be me. And it's okay to be me. I don't have to fit in your box. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Let's go. Please.
Rasan Harris, CEO of Citizens Committee for New York City. I was drawn to this gathering because of the title, I'm Not Broken, because there is so much brokenness and so much healing that's needed. And can you talk to me a little bit about your healing journey and also the dichotomy of recognizing that you're wounded, but also stepping into power to be able to move forward?
Great question.
great question.
Yeah.
My healing journey continues every day. The fact that I'm going to my first men's healing retreat in the middle of my book launch, September 19th to the 21st, I needed that for me. And trying to sit in this space of, oh wow, it's out there. People have called me and they're like, I now understand. But it's hard. It's hard to feel so vulnerable and exposed because I too want to be liked. And I fear that a lot of professional doors may have been closed by telling my story. And I'm praying and believing that my higher power and the universe is going to conspire in my favor to continue to allow me opportunities to show up as my full self, to continue to provide opportunities for those other little Jessies that exist out there. Part of reclaiming my power is being able to meet groups like Brave Movement, Men's Healing, be able to suit up and show up in meetings of recovery and continue to be a sponsor for others and continue to fight for PPIA so that other students of color that want to enter into public policy can. It's imperative for me to continue on my healing. And I do want to say this, I do EMDR, which is the eye movement desensitization, therapy that they use for PTSD, individuals coming from, military veterans. I do parts work. I do talk therapy. The sad part about it is that it's expensive. I pay for it out of pocket. And I still don't pay the $250 to $300 an hour rate. I can't afford that. I'm a struggling author.
Not for long.
It's access to mental health is so important in our communities. And destigmatizing that it's okay to seek mental health. In Latino culture, it's, ay, ¿supiste? Fue el psiquiatra. Creo que está un poco loquito. And being able to break the stigma. And so I keep talking about the need for creating access to mental health. My mom will not go to a therapist because she experiences, I talk in my book, that woman therapist, that white woman therapist that I was just a steady paycheck through the Victim Witness Program. They paid her weekly $125 an hour to help little Jessie. She knew about the sex work, she knew about the drug use, and never once recommended drug and alcohol treatment. That's not okay. And no child should be left alone to maneuver the public health system and mental health system by themselves and their parents trying to seek help, but there's no culturally competent, there's no people that speak multiple languages to help those families navigate the mental health system. So part of my goal is, empowering, right? My healing journey also continues to empower me to suit up and show up as best as I can on a daily basis to try to help improve the lives of others. I don't want no other little Jessie to struggle the way I did. And sadly, they continue to.
So true. Yes, sir, please, and I'll come to you.
Yes, good evening. One, thank you. Darren, actually, you and I share Abyssinia together. I was actually christened by Adam Clayton Powell. And Jesse, the first question is, and briefly, are you MWBE certified for state and federal? Something to consider, especially if you consider yourself struggling as an author. But more importantly, being that we exist in such a polarized environment, how are you as a social impact consultant making connection with individuals who don't have a cultural connection or are through cognitive dissonance, insensitive or indifferent to the needs of our greater societies writ large?
I would love to become WMBE certified. I just reached out to some friends in DC to help me with the process. Folks have been so busy that they haven't been able to reach back out, but I'm seeking that kind of guidance. It'd be great. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And it's important that those of us that are at the table, when I'm talking about impact investing for housing, it's how do we create, so let me back up. I became a real estate developer because Darren Walker, Miguel Garcia at the time, Carl Anthony, you were at Rockefeller, a group of foundations funded a program called the Center for Urban Redevelopment Excellence at UPenn. And it was a 2-year fellowship where for 3 months, 2 months we were taking classes at UPenn between the Wharton School of Design and the Wharton Business School and the School of Design. And they placed us in real estate development companies for 2 years. They helped with the salary, with the goal of creating the next generation of socially conscious real estate developers. I got placed at Bank of America, which is one of the largest developers in the country. That was made possible because Foundation saw a gap and said, Jesse, we know you've been applying to these real estate development companies for jobs and no one's hiring you. I don't know why else they weren't hiring me, but they weren't hiring me. And so I found a way in and I became a developer and built 5,000 units of affordable housing. And so when I'm at the table creating these programs, it's how can we create mechanisms for BIPOC developers to have access to funding, rapid deployment of capital for land acquisition and entitlement of properties and holding those assets for future redevelopment, and making that available for BIPOC individuals that want to become developers. It's easier to teach, in my view, a community organizer finance and impact investing than it is to teach someone in the finance world community organizing. So I think that there's an opportunity here to work on impact investing strategies within the community organizing sector to be able to get some of those access to capital off the ground. Sorry for that long-winded answer.
Last two questions here, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Amara. I interned here over the summer, so I'm very happy to be back. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. I'm actually a minor in creative writing, so it was very wonderful to hear about your whole process. And I'm actually working on a piece right now about my own like childhood sexual trauma. So I wanted to kind of ask, how did you feel like it was ready to write your story, and how did you decide it was like finally time? Because the healing process is ongoing. So how did you feel like this point in time in the process, I'm kind of ready to share my story? And how was it like when you started like writing? Was it like, how are the emotions? Painful? Was it more like a release? I would love to hear more about that.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for sharing. I thank you. It was, so I didn't start writing my book with the intention of publishing. Being in recovery, people keep asking me, how have you been a secret for so long? I'm like, well, I haven't. I'm in recovery. I got a sponsor. I got my community of people in recovery through my step work that they've known my story all along. I started writing when my dad died because someone in my family at 11 years old started dealing with an eating disorder, started struggling with an eating disorder. Not in my book because of the editing process. I was bulimic at Harvard. So what you see now was not what I looked like 10 years ago. I was about 100 pounds lighter, ripped, muscular when I met you.
You were very, very, he was very toned.
Very toned, very ripped. And, you know, and it's funny because what I see in the mirror now is like, I don't see the attractive, distinguished, man of color, handsome Latino gentleman, right? That you all see. I see a 47-year-old overweight brown man that in gay years is like 70. But I started writing because when I wanted to talk to this family member, I wasn't given the opportunity to. I wasn't able to disclose with this family member that I was at one point bulimic and my journey of dealing with my eating disorder. Men don't talk about eating disorders. And so when I was told that I couldn't, and I found out that other people were telling my narrative for me in their own way, I said, no. And I found out that there was an ignorance to the family journey. So I decided to write down my narrative. And I hit a I started in Hawaii. Some friends took me out. And it became 700 pages of single-spaced blah. I tried Post-its. I tried an outline. I tried to ask people how to do this writing process. And finally, one author, Malina Alegría, who wrote Quinceañera, said, quit asking about the process and just start writing. And I just started writing. And she said, you'll know when you're done. And when I hit that last sentence, I knew I was done, but I had 700 pages of just stuff. And so I decided to go on the editing journey. But I want to say this real quick, and it's because I didn't get into the publishing world through the traditional path. I was told that my writing was mediocre at best, and that no one would ever want to pick up my story because men don't talk about these issues. And it was really hurtful to hear that. I happened to get invited to have a conversation with Regina King at Netflix and her sister, well, with her sister and her team, and someone here in this room was a part of that meeting. And Regina's sister asked me, they had just started Netflix. She said, where are you with your manuscript, with your book proposal? I'm like, I can't find an agent. No one wants to represent me. That meeting, a week later, I met with Macro, Charles King, his wife Stacy King, and this Latina woman that was there, met with me. It was supposed to be a 20-minute pitch for a book-to-film project. It turned into 2.5 hours of tears and conversation. And she said, I have somebody I want you to meet, who we've worked with on a number of book-to-film projects. That person, Leopoldo Gut, introduced me to my agent, Lisa Gallagher, who's back there, and she believed in me. And she took my book to this gentleman right here, Cristobal Pera, who at the time was at Penguin Random House, and he believed in me. And they championed the story all the way through. And so when you're told that your story, your writing is mediocre, when you're told that no one's gonna wanna read it, I tell people, don't listen to the noise, keep on writing, tell your truth, and you will find those moments of magic where people will be placed in your life at those strategic moments to hold your hand and say, hey, come on, I got somebody I want you to meet. And just believing that there's no option for me to give up. And now look at me. So thank you for that question. I hope I answered it.
Beautifully. Beautifully. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Miriam Safi. I used to actually many years ago work at the Ford Foundation, and now I'm a Foreign Service Officer in the Secretary's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, newly formed last year. But my question is a personal one. First, I want to thank you for your courage in sharing your story. I myself am a survivor of a child sexual assault, female genital mutilation. I don't sound like an FGM survivor. It's seen as something that's in faraway places. But about 5-6 years ago, I was working in the Office of Global Women's Issues in a Foreign Service posting, and I sort of came out with my story in a it stumbled out of me, not by choice. I sort of had buried it. But I came out in a Guardian piece and have become sort of a face of this, right? And my question to you, and I've struggled with this myself, is now I've become defined by it. I'm a U.S. diplomat. I'm all these things. I'm interested in many things. You're interested in housing. You're interested in not just your trauma. How do you push back on the commodification of trauma? I've been on panels like these, not these in particular, but even at the UN, saying, I'm a policymaker, but we don't want to hear about your policy prescription on ending FGM, even though that was my actual job. We just want to hear you perform your trauma as a trauma puppet. So how do you push back? How do you control your narrative? Even the title nerd, I loved it. I just loved it. But how do you control that in a context where you're also in a space where you're potentially making a documentary or Netflix or whatnot? So what would you tell the Jessie before you went on this journey of really coming public?
Wow.
Great. Thank you for that.
And thank you. I remember being in the federal government, working at HUD, and I was applying to the Office of Trafficking of Humans, and no, rejection letter. And it's funny because I've been wanting to work in this space because I still don't see individuals with lived experiences being at the table formulating policy. And it's funny, now people are starting to ask. And there's so much more to me than being a survivor. It's a part of my story. The hard part for me that I've had to learn, I would tell Jessie a few months ago what Terrell McCraney, writer of the movie Moonlight, told me recently. Because I said, hey, man, I'm having a hard time celebrating. I don't know how to celebrate. I don't even feel like an author yet. And I said, when you're interviewed and people are using terms, you didn't in this way, when people use term victim, gang raped, abused, and me having to say, no, my story is about moving from surviving to thriving. It's about from living in trauma to being triumphant, and trying to reclaim the narrative for myself. And what Terrell told me, Terrell, I apologize. I have two Terrells in my life. When Terrell McCraney said, before you walk into an interview, create that space for yourself and try to surround yourself with light and what your intention is. And I asked Paul to be here. And I just met Paul recently because of my desire to want to help the Brave movement, because it's survivor-led. And he offered to be here as a support because it's still not easy. And it's still hard because I feel like I somewhat pigeonholed myself. And I'm trying to believe that the world will see that Jessie isn't his totality. This is something that happened to him. And I carry my message so that other survivors find hope that they're not defined only by their abuse, but that we do become lawyers, we do become doctors, we become gardeners, we become architects, we do create policies for others. So I wish I would have told Jesse earlier, hey, Papa, surround yourself with the people that are gonna help you celebrate and those that love you, because you're gonna have a lot of people approaching you to relive that trauma because it's what sells and it's not how I function. So surround yourself with good people that are gonna protect you and have your back. Eric's here, lives in San Francisco. Jaime's here, who I haven't seen in years. So I know that there's people out here that love me and care for me for Jesse and just want me to succeed.
Well, this evening is a celebration, and we hope that you will allow us to celebrate you, dear friend. I'm so proud of you, Jesse, and to see over these years the person you continue to evolve into and will continue to evolve into is incredibly gratifying for me. And I know on behalf of everyone here, thank you for this story that is a story that is filled with complexity. And nuance and the breadth of human experiences. And so that's what you are going to be known for telling this story, this profoundly impactful story. Thank you, dear friend.
Thank you. What Will said earlier today, the regenerative nature of the human spirit. And what I can sit here honestly with you and believe that I'm not alone. And I've never been alone. You were that moment of magic in my life that continue to show up and believe in little Jesse. So thank you for what you do so that other little Jessies, little Darren Walkers, don't suffer like we did.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking the author, Jesse Leon.